You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, as always, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak, Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 5. We are in a COVID-19 world. Another week of football has gone by. I can't believe it's week 5 already. I mean, things just, it's another year where I'm saying it's week 5 already. It breezes by. Definitely a different year, Bob. Things are happening, each day. So we're kind of on eggshells, but there's football nonetheless. What's going on in New Mexico tonight, sir?
We are doing quite well. Nobody here practicing on their own. We are well within the mandates by the NFL, keeping us in line, unlike the Tennessee Titans, who apparently are not following the protocols as strictly as we'd like. Reports of them out on the practice field. We'll get into some of the newsy items here after Kyle says hello, because he's such a cheerful presence.
Hey, guys. Not happy.
There he is.
Not happy about these Titans. Get your stuff together, Titans. You two Raiders. The two Patriots. Patriots, at least they're contained. You're doing all right, Patriots. It's about as expected. Titans, be better.
Tighten up.
Nice.
See what I did
nice,
there?
Nice.
Tighten up.
All right, so I'll just dig
negligence.
into that one a little bit. The Titans, with a couple days without positive tests, it looked like they were on track to get back to their facility on Wednesday. Then they had more positive tests. All this while, there had been reporting that the NFL and the NFLPA were investigating perhaps some improprieties or some failures to follow the protocols that the NFL and the NFLPA laid out in the COVID environment to prevent the spread of the virus among the teammates. And part of that was the linebackers coach who initially got it, it seems on team, did not report feeling under the weather, right? He showed up for work and didn't want to say he didn't feel good. And so it kind of snowballed from there to the point where we had actual Tennessee Titans led by Ryan Tannehill on a practice field at a local school, working out. And when it was reported on by Paul Kaharski at paulkaharski.com, put out photos of it, Roger Saffold of the Titans retweeted it and said, yeah, we're doing what we think. We gotta be ready for the next game. Well, also there has to be a next game. And so we'll see what happens. This would impact both the Titans and the Bills. The Buffalo Bills, the 4-0 Buffalo Bills led by Josh Allen, and they're playing really well. So you hate to see this impact other teams. You mentioned the Raiders also having the issues, the Patriots having issues. So, ultimately, if this spread goes further, we could have 6 games or 6 teams impacted by this before all is said and done. We already have a bye week. Our first byes with the Detroit Lions and Green Bay Packers, both off this week. Well, half a bye, because the Green Bay Packers are off this week. Nobody cares about the Lions. That was mean, but true. So we'll be watching that, and you'll want to check the Football Diehards website to see what's going on there. I'm just curious if, Kyle, in season-long leagues, how are the leagues you're in handling this?
Yeah, so I'm a commissioner of a few leagues, and I guess the starting point was that anytime we have a game that has any amount of uncertainty, I already posted it once. I'll make sure I go back and post it again, because I end up commissioning a lot of the leagues I'm in. I always say, whenever we have a game that has a certain amount of uncertainty, you can just start a player in that game. If they don't play, you should have previously named an alternate, and that alternate just scores. I know leagues do it different ways. With the bye week, it's going to be weird to see if the Titans game gets canceled or they just get a forfeit. It's going to be really weird. I don't have a strong approach on how do you say just like, sorry, man, if you drafted Titans, you get losses. And in this case, it'd probably be if you drafted Bills. If you were smart enough to get on Josh Allen, you get losses. So I think you should declare alternates with the not bye weeks anymore, with the potential forfeitures. I'm not really sure. Like, Justin, do you have any preference as to how we handle that? Because in terms of the uncertainty in games, it's easy enough to either say you just treat it like an injury, and if you play a player who doesn't play, tough luck. That is acceptable. I think it's not that much different from an injury. Or you give people the benefit of the doubt and you let them name alternates. I don't know how you should really be treating games that are just simply going to not be played if that ends up being the case.
Yeah, I get the alternates. We're doing that in a couple leagues. Like if, for instance, if the Patriots didn't play at all, we had to pick somebody else, and then you would grab their points instead. I mean, it's scary times, but we've seen him combined. The three of us, we've probably been playing fantasy football for 5-6 decades, I would guess right now. So we've seen it all. I mean, we've seen teams win and lose by a decimal, by missed field goals, by punt returns. I mean, we've seen freaky things happen, and it sucks. We've been unlucky. We've been lucky at times. And I mean, this is why you have to draft depth. I mean, you just mentioned Josh Allen, like he's going to get screwed because of negligence of the other team if they don't play. I mean, and you drafted Josh Allen, like he is playing out of his mind. So it's tough. Now, I certainly wouldn't want to be the commissioner and make these decisions, but you just hope that you're on the better side of, I don't know, variance in this case where you have enough depth and players to replace players that wouldn't play. But as far as forfeitures go, I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah. And that would be kind of the next level. That would be if the Titans were found to have, engaged in this wrongdoing and it cost them this game. And right. I guess, at some point the league has to figure out their competitive angles, just like we do as fantasy commissioners and managers. And one of the things, I had, Marcus Grant, our friend at NFL.com, I talked to him Saturday, and he talked a little bit about maybe, thinking about having a best ball component to your league, maybe whether you do it completely or you run it in parallel with your regular one-loss record in case something comes up. You just work on the total points at any given time. Now, people may have not built their rosters right to be a best ball team, right? So, there's that aspect, but still it is an interesting approach. And I'm sure a lot of leagues are doing different things. most of the leagues I'm in are doing what Kyle suggested. You can send in your contingency players and go from there. So, we'll be watching these things. You'll be watching them along with us at the footballdiehards.com website. I think it wasn't until Thursday that we found out the outcome of then it was the Titans Steelers. So we'll find out this week, I'm sure, in fairly short order about the Titans Bills. The league is, at least, if nothing else, the league's been very transparent, putting out all the facts, giving us the information as it comes out. And it gives us a chance to maybe, try to make some plans in advance as much as possible. Can't plan for injuries. And I'll just remind you too, last week the Saints were ruled out 6 players. It was not a COVID issue. They had 6 guys hurt out. So these kind of things happen even in games, where the teams are playing. We're going to have to deal with them, and we should be used to that, to some degree. But there are a number of guys who have left the field of play, at least for the near future. Immediately, if you're watching Thursday night's game, there was no Chris Godwin. Will be no Chris Godwin, no LaShawn McCoy, Leonard Fournette, Mike Evans and Scotty Miller both ailing a little bit, but expected to play. So we'll see how that one plays out for the New Orleans Saints. I mentioned they had 6 guys out. One of them, of course, was Michael Thomas. We'll see if he can come back. They're a Monday night game with the Chargers, so we won't know much about Thomas or Mike Williams, for that matter, until Thursday. But we do know Austin Ekeler will miss multiple weeks, hamstring and knee. Looked very painful, like maybe some meat was pulled from the bone, Justin. Joshua Kelly's been my huckleberry all along. How much is Justin Jackson going to rain on my parade?
Well, I'm with you on Kelly. In fact, we grabbed him in the high stakes league. And he's a guy that, if something did happen to Austin Ekeler, Kelly would be the first guy up. And I think he is. I just think that Justin Jackson's going to have more of a role than we initially thought, catching passes. So it'll be interesting. I mean, every team has a committee. We know that, and more teams are going in that direction. I think tonight Kelly's the guy, but Jackson is not far behind him. So to occupy that, I told the guys yesterday, I said, we already have Kelly. It would behoove us to grab Jackson. This way we have the whole Chargers backfield occupied. So they're both going to have a role. It's a scary backfield tonight.
I guess the big hope for all of us is that Justin Herbert holds on to that quarterbacking job. The young man has been playing lights out. It's funny when you think back to how we viewed him on the draft. He was the least appealing of the early round guys, and here he is demonstrating not only, that I think it was just kind of he's a blah personality, right? It just didn't seem like there was much to him. Clearly on the football field there is. Hopefully Anthony Lynn will let go of his allegiance and old style of, it's Tyrod Taylor's job when he's healthy. Or hopefully Tyrod Taylor never gets healthy, which is entirely possible if the Chargers doctor gets hold of him again. Kyle, we have a similar circumstance in Cleveland where Nick Chubb, injured an MCL, not out for the long term, but, for a number of weeks, an extended period. Kareem Hunt suddenly becomes one of the best players that you drafted, correct?
Yeah, you got what you paid for in Kareem Hunt and then some. He was the most premium, to my knowledge, handcuff in terms of what you were paying for a running back who did not project to lead his team in carries. Through 3 weeks, he was actually doing fine. He was scoring touchdowns at a pretty high clip. He was catching a lot of passes. So you weren't absolutely reeling because you spent so much on a quote, backup, quote, running back. And now you got, you hit the lottery. You came up all sevens. I know we saw what I believe it was 13 carries, like 95 yards from Dearness Johnson. Dearness Johnson runs like a 4.8 something 40, and he played in the AAF. I do not believe we are going to see a lot of Dearness Johnson going forward. I think this is the Kareem Hunt show until Nick Chubb comes back. I think he could play well enough to the point where Nick Chubb comes back and is maybe a fringe RB2, is a mid to low RB2 at the least, because Kareem Hunt is incredibly talented. They were giving him touches over Nick Chubb in a lot of scenarios anyways. Clearly, they are going to use him a lot. I don't think Dearness Johnson plays as much of a role as he did on Sunday. They had a pretty significant lead over Dallas, and Kareem Hunt entered the week with a groin injury. With another week to heal, I think he gets closer to 100%. I'm not sure if he gets to 100%. And then they ride him on Sunday. If you got Kareem Hunt, you probably have a top 5 running back for at least the next 3 weeks.
That's what we like to have. A few other notes of interest, quarterback style. Lamar Jackson, sore knee, held out of Wednesday's practice. Nobody seems concerned that it's going to be a bigger issue. They did pull him out of the game a little early, at the end of the Washington football team game. By the way, Washington football team pulled their quarterback. Dwayne Haskins has gone to number 3. We've got Kyle Allen will get the start against the Rams this week with Alex Smith moving into the number 2 spot. Hoping we don't see that. But we'll see what Kyle Allen could do. It would appear though with the move down to number 3 that this is Ron Rivera's way of saying the experiment is over. And also Ron Rivera makes a great point. I mean, it's the NFC East. Nobody is out of it. Why? I kind of get why you're making this move. Although we've seen both the good and the bad of Kyle Allen at times, and there's been plenty of both. Drew Lock could return this week. Sam Darnold will not play. Joe Flacco will make his first start in a couple years. He didn't, I don't know how enthusiastic. Le'Veon Bell could return this game. Jimmy Garoppolo could return as well, practice on a limited break basis to open the week Wednesday. And we have Raheem Mostert also possibly playing. So those are all issues we'll be watching for over the course of the coming days. Again, check the website. Lots of news and commentary available there on all these situations. And we will now comment on some DFS plays. Justin, I'm going to start with you. All these changes and the shuffling and the injuries at quarterback, how are you leveraging this into DFS success?
Well, we're going to start at the top again and look at Lamar Jackson. I was not on him last week. I get why people were. And if you used him, you probably stacked him with Mark Andrews and you got what you wanted out of that stack. Unfortunately, Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns to 5 different weapons and Dak Prescott went off. So, 7,900, there are better options. They're a heavy favorite at home against the Bengals. I'm not going to talk you off of Lamar Jackson ever. But you're really looking for 30 plus points. And it's going to take a close game to get there. Personally, this is a short list, so you guys should be proud of me. I'm going to Patrick Mahomes at home, against the Raiders. It wasn't when he played the Patriots last week. He was still Patrick Mahomes. It was a pretty good football game. Pats look atrocious, but he got you 20 DraftKings points. I mean, this is Patrick Mahomes at home against an AFC West rival in the Raiders. I can see him throwing 4 touchdowns. I can see him throwing for 350 yards. I will stack him. It's just a matter of who am I going to stack him with. Dak Prescott is another guy that I'm going to go back to. He won me some cash last week. Although the Giants did a pretty good job against Jared Goff the other day. So, I mean, this is a game where Dak Prescott comes back to earth. I don't know that it is. The Giants are an absolute mess. We love the weapons on the Dallas Cowboys. He just spreads them out. I can't believe their record is not better than it reads. Going to scroll down. I'm fine with Matt Ryan this week at 6,100. I think he's in it's a good spot he's in a spot to play for like a tournaments for me. You're going to use him with Calvin Ridley. 6,100, way down at the bottom. I think we see a track meet here against the Panthers. So I love the spot for Ryan. He's projecting well. If I'm going to pay way down, and I suppose you could use Teddy Bridgewater in that game too. He's also projecting well. The wide receivers are just a big question mark for me there. You mentioned Jimmy G being questionable. It is only Wednesday. He's a guy that I would look to if you told me that he was going to play. And also Drew Lock with Stephon Gilmore not playing. I mean, that changes the game in New England. It really, really does. I mean, you look at guys like Jerry Jeudy. I mean, he can go off. So I will use Drew Lock if he's playing in maybe a tournament or two. And that's as low as I'm going. So the list, 1A is Patrick Mahomes. I suppose I'm falling in love with Dak Prescott again. Deshaun Watson's in a good spot. Don't want to pay near 7K. I think the absence of DeAndre Hopkins is hurting him more than people realize that it would. I love Matt Ryan at 6,100 at home in a track fest. And Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, all those guys. That's a pretty good list there, Justin. Kyle, expand on that if you would.
Yeah, simply put, we have Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as the highest priced quarterbacks on DraftKings. It should honestly be Josh Allen and Dak Prescott. These guys, along with Russell Wilson, who is not on the slate, have scored over 33 points a game, both of them. Whereas Patrick Mahomes, I think largely Patrick Mahomes he's played in a handful of games where he hasn't had to do much. He didn't have to do a ton against the Ravens, and he still did. He didn't have to do anything. Like, you could score 0 points against Brian Hoyer and Jared Stidham, and you could still end up winning that game if you put up a field goal and you pick off Jared Stidham and take it to the house. Jared Stidham is absolutely terrible, and it'll be interesting to see if he competes with Cam Newton when Cam Newton comes back. I'm sure that will come up in some awful beat report. But Patrick Mahomes versus Las Vegas Raiders could very much be another situation like that. They're nearly 2 touchdown favorites. They have a crazy implied team total. It's like over 34 right now. But if Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes out, scores the first or second touchdown, that really does cap Patrick Mahomes' upside if the Raiders can't hang. And I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to hang. So for that reason, I love Josh Allen. I have no clue if Josh Allen is going to get to play this week, so I won't talk about it too much. He's been incredible as a passer. Tennessee has put up pretty solid numbers in spurts, some games less so than others. We saw them versus Jacksonville have an incredible offensive performance. So I like what they can do in terms of the run back options. Won't talk about it too much. Dak Prescott, my only concern is the same concern that we have with Patrick Mahomes, but the Chiefs' defense is actually quite good. Obviously, they crushed the Patriots, no surprise there, but they played incredibly well against Lamar Jackson. Dallas Cowboys' defense is not that. They have not played well. They have not played at an average to below average level. They played as a bottom 5 defense in every single week we've seen them. Outside of, I guess they played all right against the Rams, but they weren't winning that game, so the Rams weren't forced to score. So really, in the past 3 weeks, they are probably the worst defense in the NFL. So although I don't love Daniel Jones, I think he has enough juice. He's aggressive enough that there is potential that his team puts up points and competes with Dak Prescott, who I still prefer despite, the ownership discrepancy. I think you can play Jones. I'm going to get more basic and stick with Dak Prescott. Moving down a little bit, Matt Ryan, the game environment, the total is great, a 54-point total at home versus, Carolina's defense, who is terrible in themselves. And the last one I will talk about, Kyle Allen at 4,100. 4,100, roughly half the price of Lamar Jackson. He is probably less than half the price of Lamar Jackson a few weeks ago. He needs a touchdown to be a value. I think he's not the worst play in cash.
I like
He's
that.
worth every penny.
Yes, you get what you pay for, by golly. And again, I've mentioned we've seen the 4 touchdown games. We've seen the 4 interception games. It can be hit or miss, and that's okay. And it's too bad everyone can't play Dallas every single week. And if you're not playing Danny Jones this week, I don't know when you are. For the foreseeable future, look, I was high on Daniel Jones coming into the season. Mm-hmm. I knew it would be a rough stretch to open things. This team is worse than I expected. There's no two ways about it. So Kyle, let's move along to the running back position. Seems like there's a lot of plays here. And I guess, the easy thing is, who's playing Carolina? Is it that simple?
For running back, maybe. Todd Gurley, I haven't liked what I've seen from Todd Gurley, but he has a number of touchdowns. He's basically doing exactly what he did last year, where he doesn't look great, and he just puts up enough touchdowns throughout the year where at the end of the season, if he plays a full 16 games, we're going to look back and go, oh, Todd Gurley was the RB10. How interesting. I still can't get on board with that. I think the touchdown numbers are probably booing and inefficient and a guy who is not getting 100% of the work. So for me, I'm probably not going there. On the other side of the ball, it's weird that DraftKings right now has Christian McCaffrey named Mike Davis, and he's only 6,400. But I'm going to call him Christian McCaffrey. He has seen 8, and 5 catches. He's getting a ton of targets, 8, 9, and 6 targets. So this new version of Christian McCaffrey, who's only 6,400, 15 points, 23 points, 22 points. They're using Mike Davis in that exact Christian McCaffrey role. I think that is perfectly fine to pay for him at 6,400 and the chalk, which he will be a fairly popular play. He frankly deserves to be over 7K. He frankly deserves to be maybe close to 8K based on how he's being used, and the game environment is incredible. 2 games that are going to have a lot of ownership but could potentially be blowouts. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and the Chiefs and Ezekiel Elliott and Dallas both are major touchdown regression candidates as well. Some of the most used backs in the league, but just haven't quite scored touchdowns considering how much they're being used. If they get out to an early lead, I think both of these guys could stymie their passing games because they won't have to pass and could get a ton of carries. They have 25 plus touch upside. So I think they're great pivots. The last one I'll go with, Damian Harris, 4,300. It's quite an ugly game that they're playing in versus Denver, but Damian Harris is a guy you would want to get the ball as opposed to passing with Jared Stidham. That's what we saw with them, versus the Chiefs. And it sort of, it worked out in terms of they kind of held the Chiefs in check. I mean, they did hold the Chiefs in check to an extent that you can hold the Chiefs in check. And they did it by controlling the clock. They won the time of possession game. They just, gave up a touchdown through their offense. Their offense gave up a touchdown without having let the other offense on the field. That hurts. Damian Harris, 17 carries. Rex Burkhead's 11. I think he's perfectly fine at 4,300. And his ownership actually doesn't really reflect what I think is pretty solid value.
Yeah, I want to make a point, and I'll get to your running backs here just as well. But Michael David Smith at Pro Football Talk had a nice thread on the Twitter, one of the few nice threads I've ever seen, actually. And what he wrote was, when former number 2 overall pick Saquon Barkley was lost for the season with a knee injury, he had 34 yards on 19 carries. The 2 backs who have replaced him, Gallman and Devonta Freeman, both have more yards on fewer carries. The Lions have used the second-round picks on running backs in each of the last 2 years. Their leading rusher is 35-year-old Adrian Peterson, who signed with the team less than a week before the first game. The Jaguars cut former number 4 overall pick Leonard Fournette, replaced him with James Robinson, who is on pace to finish this season with 1,140 rushing yards and 644 receiving yards, more yards from scrimmage than Fournette had in any season in Jacksonville. The Dolphins traded for Matt Breida and signed Jordan Howard in free agency this offseason. Their leading rusher is Myles Gaskin, a 2019 7th-round pick. And then, of course, what Kyle pointed to, Christian McCaffrey's the highest paid running back in the NFL this year. Yeah, Teague got hurt after 2 games, was replaced by Davis, who has more yards from scrimmage than McCaffrey. The Panthers won both games. Davis started and lost both games. McCaffrey started. Running backs, opportunity matters. Justin, tell us about the opportunities you see this week in DFS at the position.
Well, I'm looking at Ezekiel Elliott. Didn't have any last week, but I think it's a good spot to go back. I think people are going to flock to Dak Prescott and that wide receiver cast, and rightfully so, to be quite frank. I just said flank. Looking at Derrick Henry, but again, there's uncertainty. We record Wednesday. A lot of revelations will occur before the games begin. Scrolling down, obviously you need Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think you're going to need some pieces of that Chiefs offense if you want to be successful. It's going to be a blowout. Where the points are going to come from could come from everywhere, to be honest. But I'm looking at their tight end personally. James Conner's in a good spot for sure at home against the Eagles. Volume based. I mean, we know we're going to get out of James Conner. It's going to be 22 touches, probably going to be right around 100 yards or over 100 yards, and I think he's going to be in a fantastic spot. I mean, what I do is going to be based on ownership. So as the week progresses. I fell in love with Kenyon Drake last week, and it did not work out at all. And I really didn't want to go there, but he was the chalk and highly owned. I don't know why. Anyways, Joe Mixon, 6,300. Kyle, Bob, we said it was coming. It came last week. 45 DraftKings points. I mean, Joe Mixon has arrived. This week, he's going to get a test at Baltimore. But he's involved in the passing game. I think people are going to see that and, steer away from him despite the 45 points. The reality is he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. So I'll go back to Mixon. I don't think he's going to come in at a high ownership. I think his ceiling is as high as anyone's. So I'll probably go right back there and have some stack of some sort. Scrolling, I talked to Dave Richard, our friend of CBS, before I got on with you guys today, and he said, play Chase Edmonds. I don't know if he was being sarcastic given what happened with Kenyon Drake and me this past week, but we know one thing. The Cardinals love Chase Edmonds. So if Drake doesn't play, Chase Edmonds is in play. I get the Antonio Gibson love. He's the guy. We thought he was going to be a 2-down back, lined up wide last week a little bit. This is the guy that we wanted to see. This is the guy that we saw in college, catching passes. You tell me he's going to have 15 to 20 touches. I want in at 5K. I know it's against the Rams. They're heavy dogs at home. I will use some Antonio Gibson. I will also have a Patriots running back undetermined. I think Harris is the guy in terms of the Sony Michel role, little involvement in the passing game. James White is underpriced too. I mean, we've seen James White at 6K before. He's back. He's still grieving. Horrible what happened to his parents. But he's a guy that can get us 5, 6, 7 catches any week. So 4,900 is too cheap. It's going to be Zeke for me. At 1, I think Miles Sanders is a fantastic tournament play. Joe Mixon and where did I leave off here? Sorry. Antonio Gibson. No David Johnson. I think he's going to be chalk again, despite the beautiful layout for David Johnson. He was the chalk last week. Did not use him. I think, we cling on to the guy in Arizona from 5 years ago. He is not that anymore.
Yeah, we moved so fast. We could have mentioned that the Houston Texans fired Bill O'Brien, but I don't know that it really matters. Doesn't change the offense materially. Romeo Crennel takes over as the head coach. Tim Kelly will continue as the play caller, although he gave that up to one game for one game to O'Brien. He'll get it back quickly. So, and I don't know that I think it's kind of a wash. So, Justin, I implore you, please, sir, tell me about your wide receivers.
Well, DeAndre Hopkins was the chalk last week, and I think he's a guy you're going to play every week just about. Did not show up, despite having 7 receptions. He got shut down. But the targets were there. They're always going to be there. Underpriced at the Jets. You go right back at him. This is the time that you do it. Calvin Ridley has the Q tag this week, but I mentioned that game could be a track meet. I think Ridley is going to play. I'm going to use him with Matt Ryan if he does play. And if I don't use Calvin Ridley, it's probably going to be Russell Gage. Stephon Diggs is jumping in models. He has a good matchup. A lot of uncertainty there. There's a lot of pieces that I want, but I'm not falling in love too much right now because it's only Wednesday. Mentioned last week on the show that Amari Cooper was going to get a touchdown or 2. Only had 1, but absolutely went ham last week. 7,400 against the Giants. Again, they played well against the Rams last week. This could be kind of a trap. I love the Cowboys. I love that offense, but people are going to flock to them. I may swerve as far as the wide receivers and use Ezekiel Elliott. Going down, this is going to be ready for this, Kyle? I'm going to use Will Fuller at 6,600. In fact, Will Fuller is just about the only wide receiver that I have locked in on Wednesday. I mean, this is the Will Fuller, Kyle, that you love, that we love. This is the Will Fuller that Deshaun Watson needs with DeAndre Hopkins out of Houston. So give me a healthy Will Fuller in this game script against the Jaguars. I think it's perfect. I think he's appropriately priced. And I think if he's healthy, he's as good as it gets. And I think his rapport with Deshaun Watson when on the field is second to none. In that same game, I'm going to run a stack back. I'm going to use DJ Shark. I should have used him last week. Phenomenal rapport with Gardner Minshew. So I will use both of those guys in a lot of my lineups, running it back, anticipating a lot of points, a lot of targets to go around. This is a position where we love and we could talk about for an hour, just the wide receivers alone. So I'm not going to take up too much time. But a big question mark is going to be who I fall on, whether it's DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson. And it has been, we've talked about this as well. We anticipated Moore being a top 12 guy. Has not happened. Teddy has leaned on Robbie Anderson, the high A-dot guy. Teddy's a low A-dot guy. This is the week that I think you got to go back to DJ Moore I mentioned like stacking that game. I think DJ Moore, he's going to show up. The Atlanta Falcons secondary, they're an absolute mess. So this is going to be a DJ Moore week. I think we're just looking at the numbers now, and it's just a matter of time. I think this is the week that it happens. And I mentioned Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy coming to New England. They're probably going to be down. We like that type of game script. Jerry Jeudy, pound for pound, could be the best wide receiver in this class, in my opinion, with CeeDee Lamb. I think there's a handful, but Judy's right there at the top. Without Courtland Sutton, Jeudy is that wide receiver one. So he's probably going to be looking at 8 to 10 targets, 5,400, kind of a last piece guy for me. And Russell Gage, especially if Julio Jones, which doesn't look like he got hurt again, which is no surprise to anybody. If Calvin Ridley doesn't play, like I'm hitting the smash button on Russell Gage at 5,100.
Justin, I'll suggest only my great fondness and affection for you as a human keeps me from slamming down. And let's just say this. I'll brook no more of this Robbie Anderson slander on this program. Kyle, wash this nonsense from my ears with some sensible approaches at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I actually prefer, at least in tournaments, Robbie Anderson this week. I know DJ Moore has the air yard share, but Robbie Anderson, I believe it's 34 to 32, has the advantage in targets. And I don't really care who you play out of these guys. They're in the same price range. I think DJ Moore is just like 100 more. I care who the field is on. And the field is largely on DJ Moore, like a 10% in ownership. Again, people are on DJ Moore. And trust me, I love DJ Moore, I think, more than anyone on this podcast. He was one of the best receiver prospects I've seen, and he bore that out in 2 seasons. But if the targets are going to favor Robbie Anderson, the fantasy points are going to favor Robbie Anderson, and the ownership doesn't reflect that, I think you just have to play the tournament strategy game. Don't get too cute. Pivot off the ownership. Off of that, I love the Will Fuller call. Welcome to the Will Fuller team. I think if you're playing Dak Prescott, you have to play Amari Cooper. Leads the team in targets by a considerable margin. Interestingly, Michael Gallup once again coming in with a bit of an ownership advantage over CeeDee Lamb. And CeeDee Lamb is 500 cheaper. He's second on the team in receiving yards. He is third on the team in targets. And the number 2 player is Ezekiel Elliott. So it's not like it's another receiver getting run over him. Even Dalton Schultz has more targets than Michael Gallup. And he didn't even get a ton of run in week 1. So I'm kind of surprised at this Michael Gallup ownership. I will absolutely be pivoting in all of my Bills lineups. If they end up making it to Sunday, I'm pretty much just locking in a double stack of Stephon Diggs, who's incredible, and John Brown, who's quite cheap and still running as the number 2 receiver, played just as many receiving snaps as did Stephon Diggs last week. Looking down a little cheaper, I think maybe one interesting one, it's kind of gross, but Damiere Byrd at $3K. Minimum price, got 10 targets last week, and I get it. He only converted on 5 of them. But he gets 10 targets, which I believe led the team. He's $3K, and he's coming in at less than 5% ownership. It just seems like he would almost be like the optimizer free square type of play at $3K, and he's just not garnering that ownership, which I find to be interesting. I'm not saying he's a perfect play. His quarterback play projects to be among the worst in the league, but I certainly think it's worth considering. And on top of that, I do think Justin's maybe on point with these Jacksonville receivers. I think that game is interesting. A lot of smart people have told me that that's a game you want to be targeting. I look at the side of a team that is projected to be losing, but that could up their overall play volume, and it's against a Houston defense that does not in any way concern me. So I don't hate like a small amount of exposure to the overall Jacksonville offense coming from Laviska Shenault would be my favorite play, but I don't mind DJ Chark either, and I think Minshew is a guy you could probably double stack in a game that the team does score. Like in the event they score 30 points, which we saw them do against Tennessee, we saw them put up, I believe it was 27 against the Colts, maybe even more. They have some potential, so I'm kind of getting myself into some Jacksonville guys this week, so that means mostly Laviska and DJ Chark.
Interesting to note that Twitter reflexively quivered when you mentioned Damiere Byrd's name. I saw it with my own eyes. It heard you went, ooh. And you mentioned Stephon Diggs, which means I must apologize once again. Stephon Diggs, I am sorry for the horrible things I said about you and the disrespect I heaped upon you all summer long when I said it might take you some time to get in sync with Josh Allen. I was wrong, and I apologize.
Hey, real quick. And, thoughts come to my head as we speak constantly. We like this Cowboys game. I may or may not have written up Daniel Jones in Digging in the Crates, 5 300-yard games last year. So we're going to have Cowboys ownership, and we're going to want to run it back with a giant. And if we're going to use Daniel Jones lineup, the question I have for you two is, Thoughts on Darius Slayton? Do we see a Darius Slayton that we've seen a handful of times? Is this a spot for Darius Slayton? Is it to me, it looks like a fantastic spot, and the price is right at 4,800.
Once again, we have evidence that Justin can see. Yes, the eyeball test tells you Darius Slayton will be a good play. Okay. I think you can play anyone, but I think he's kind of like Daniel Jones for me. If you're not playing him this week, when are you playing him?
Well, sure.
Yeah, I love that breakdown. He's going to be super popular, so I think you kind of have to play him in either Daniel Jones stack, because Daniel Jones is not going to be nearly as popular as other quarterbacks on the slate, or in a Dak Prescott double stack with the run back, because if you just play, Amari Cooper, Darius Slayton, and Dak Prescott, it sounds like it might be contrarian because stacking with the run back isn't super popular, but that is going to be probably the most popular stack and a run back on the slate. It's a single stack of Amari Cooper, Dak, and Darius Slayton. His price is so bad. He's like top 20 in targets and in air yards. His price at 4,800 is quite terrible, but that means he's going to be high owned, so I think you have to get unique when you play Slayton would be my only caution.
Yeah, Kyle, tight ends, Beckon, tell me a happy story.
So tight end is interesting this week. More so than other weeks, we're getting just a two-pronged approach from the chalk. It's Darren Waller and Travis Kelce, the opposing tight ends in that Chiefs-Raiders game. For me personally, I am just pivoting to either Travis Kelce over Darren Waller or completely moving down to a guy like Dalton Schultz, who we've talked about in 3 consecutive weeks. He has 2 games with a touchdown, 2 games with over 70 yards, operating, at least getting more targets than Michael Gallup. You want to get pieces of this Dallas offense any way you can. He's cheap. He's coming at low ownership. And right above him at the ownership I'm looking at, George Kittle. George Kittle coming in at, sub 5% ownership right now. I find that to be absolutely absurd. After he caught all 15 of his targets, looks like the absolute monster of a George Kittle that we know and love. Knee injury is just non-existent at this point. Why is he, I get it, he's expensive and the game environment isn't as good, but why is he coming in with, a 5th or a 6th of the ownership that Darren Waller is? I just don't know. So I'm pivoting off of Darren Waller to Travis Kelce. I think Travis Kelce is just a better play. He has such a higher touchdown projection, and you need touchdowns to win tournaments. I think Darren Waller is a fine play, but for just on DraftKings, 500 more, you frankly just should be playing Travis Kelce.
Justin, who are you playing?
And like Kyle said, this is a unique week, and I have not constructed my lineups so far, but I poke around a little bit. And, this could be a week, gentlemen, where I'm using 2 tight ends. I am not opposed to using George Kittle at tight end. Like Kyle said, the ownership, that is just insane. And Travis Kelce in the same lineup or a couple, where Dallas Goedert is out, you might see Zach Ertz from a couple of years ago. We love Darren Waller. Definitely in a game where they're going to be playing from behind. Darren Waller, boys, we love him outside of football, but pound for pound, he's a top. I'm looking at all these names. He's definitely a top 5 tight end in the NFL. You're getting a deal off of him from Kittle and Kelce, so I get it. I think the decision's going to come down to ownership. I look at Mark Andrews. Some weeks he sticks out, some weeks he doesn't. And when you look at the list surrounding him, he really doesn't stick out. I think this is a guy that we like Mark Andrews. I think it's a kind of a vanilla Ravens offense, so the allure is that much more. 3 catches last week, 2 touchdowns. 3 catches the week before, 1 reception against Houston, and 5 against the Browns week 1. Touchdown dependent, 6,200. I'm not going there, but I would get why you would. There's just too many different better. If I was to start my roster construction with Kittle and Kelce, that's depending on their ownership. That's pretty good stuff. And I want a couple ceiling games from them to win a tournament. So I'm not screwing around this week. I love the Dalton Schultz call. Again, I don't think he's going to come in highly owned. I used him last week in my Dak Prescott stacks. It worked out. I think it's a pretty good swerve. I asked you guys who are you going to run back against Dallas. I think that Evan Ingram is one of these guys. If you're not using Slayton, I think that Evan Ingram's the guy. He's going to have an Evan Ingram week that we've seen in the past. It's coming. I think against the Cowboys is a great spot. So not really screwing around, boys. I'm going to pay up at tight end this week and hope for the best.
That seems reasonable enough. Defense is Justin.
Defense is, some people disregard it, Kyle being one of those guys, and I get it. You pay way down 2K, 2,100. And when you do that, I mean, they're priced like this for a reason. I mean, you're getting what you're paying for. And I'm not picking on a couple teams when I say this. There's 10, 12 teams each week that can get you 1-2 points. I mean, it's a pass happy league. It's just defense is just different than it was years ago. I'm gravitating towards the Chiefs. I mean, Kyle's right. This is a good Chiefs defense. I mean, not only are they the best offense in football, their defense is damn good at every level. So I'm going to use Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Probably going to use that correlation with the Chiefs defense. Even if I have a Patrick Mahomes team, I mean, I'm there. 3,500. I get the Patriots being priced where they are, but I don't see the necessity to go up to 4,200. So last week, kind of conviction play. I was all over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on this podcast. They did all right. They got a 6, but I mean, it was a dreamy scenario, and they were porous, to be honest with you, against the rookie at home. So right now, tonight, it is the Kansas City Chiefs at home. Like the price, I think their upside is as high as anybody's, and I think that when I play them, I'm comfortable getting, if they get me 8-9 points, I'm fine with that. And of course, you hope for 15. Last week they had 20 against the Pats.
Kyle.
Yeah, for me, Justin named my favorite one, the Chiefs. I will just give you 2 more. Texans at 2,600. I know I talked about liking Jacksonville, but we also know that their floor is what we saw against a Dolphins defense that is not very good. Like Gardner Minshew, I like him, but do I think he's infallible? Obviously not. So Houston at home, favored by I think it's close to a touchdown. I'm totally fine with paying 2,600 for them. The only other play I have that I'm surprised isn't getting a ton of pub in terms of ownership, and maybe it's the price. 3,800 is certainly a lot to pay for a defense. Man, I do love the Steelers, who are number 1 in the NFL in sacks per game. They are top 10 in turnovers forced per game, and they play Carson Wentz, one of the most turnover-prone quarterbacks through 4 weeks. The Eagles are right now top 5, or I guess you'd call it bottom 5, in turnovers per game as an offense and sacks per game allowed as an offense. Everything is just setting up for Pittsburgh to completely annihilate them. I like them as a stack with James Conner as well.
If we could, anytime you can finish a show on the note of annihilation, I think that's a great thing. I think it's been a great program this very evening. Again, if you want to find out all the latest news, notes, and information, check out the rankings, all the things we have at footballdiehards.com, and you've stumbled across this podcast out in the ether. Go to footballdiehards.com/free trial. Check it out. Take the test drive when you're ready to order. Hit the order page. Use the promo code DIEHARDS to get a 15% discount. I can tell you it's money well spent, because it's going to like Justin and Kyle mostly.
Yeah, no, I'm filthy rich. Right now we're doing this from my private jet. If you hear any, buzzing noises, you hear any champagne bottles popping, it's that subscription money. So you help fund my lifestyle. But no, for real, go ahead and check that out. A ton of awesome tools you can use. It's probably, if anything, making you, the listener, more money in terms of your DFS, what it gives you there, in terms of your season long, if you're winning your work leagues, your best ball leagues. It is making you more money than it is making me, almost for sure. And it will make you money. So go ahead and check that out. Like Bob said, for myself, you can find me at Kyle Tweets here. For Bob, you can find him at Football Diehard. And for Justin, find him at Justin Lonero. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you